Warning, the following video may be considered controversial. If you are easily offended, please don't watch. Hello everybody and welcome to the Derek Ruby Show. I am your host, the previously mentioned Mr. Ruby. You know, a lot of times when a celebrity dies, I might do a tribute video to them, or if I'm mentioning somebody who's been dead for a long time in passing, I'll put up a nice little graphic for you to see. Such as in the case with my Remembering Adam West video or my Remembering Charlie Murphy video. But this is not one of those times. This video will be titled, How Chris Benoit Affected Me. I was going to do a movie review for you this week, but then I remembered that it's been 10 years since the Benoit murders. So just to go over it real quick in case you don't know, Chris Benoit was a professional wrestler, and he killed his wife and his son, as well as himself. So really I'm making this video just to tell you a story and put it all into context. So I've been a huge wrestling fan my entire life. I've been a wrestling fan so long I can look at certain wrestling events and figure out what year certain things happened in my life. For example, I could say, oh yeah, that's the year that Ric Flair won the Royal Rumble, that was 1992. Or, oh yeah, that's the year that Hulk Hogan slammed Andre the Giant, that was 1987. So as you can imagine, being a huge wrestling fan, I was very familiar with Chris Benoit. The first time I saw him was on WWF television back in the day when he was the Pegasus Kid and he had a few shots. I was also aware of him from ECW due to magazines and some tapes I had seen, but where I really got familiar with him was WCW. And at one point WCW got so bad that sometimes I would just flip the channel just to watch Chris Benoit's matches, and then flip right back to the WWF TV. So when Chris Benoit finally came to the WWF, I was ecstatic. He was truly somebody to look up to for any young wrestling fan at the time. He was a smaller guy, but he had a real strong style, and he didn't seem like he was afraid of anything. So I remember it very well when Chris Benoit was supposed to face CM Punk for the ECW Championship at the Night of Champions, and apparently he was scheduled to win that title, but he did not show up. So the next day it came out in the news that Chris Benoit and his family had died. And I was at work that day, and I did not have cable at the time. But my brother Brett, shout out to him by the way, would tape Raw for me every week. So on the way home I picked up my tape and it was a whole tribute to Chris Benoit. All the memories, a whole bunch of matches, lots of people talking about him. And I sat there drinking and watched that video. And I was very upset. I got a little emotional. I wasn't on the floor bawling or anything, but I was very upset. I don't remember before or after being upset about a celebrity dying like I was that day. So to my surprise the next day, the shocking news came out that he had killed his family and that he had killed himself. And that just blew me away. First of all, I was very surprised that he killed his wife. I don't care how crazy a woman might make you, or your husband might make you, or your significant other, or whoever. Killing your spouse is a horrendous action. But what topped it all off was the fact that he killed his child, who I believe was 7 years old at the time. So in a matter of a 24-hour period, a childhood hero that I looked up to became a monster, just like that. And you'll hear lots of people say what a great guy he was, how quiet he was, how professional he was, and what a good friend he was. He might have been all those things, but when that weekend came up, he lost it, and he became a monster. And this impacted the wrestling business negatively and positively. The negative way that it impacted the business was all the news outlets jumped all over wrestling and talked about how this was steroids' fault and all this other stuff. You had Nancy Grace and Sean Hannity and lots of people like that just trying to hammer all the wrestlers in the WWE for what just happened. The positive side of this is that WWE has a strict wellness policy nowadays. And lots of wrestlers who may have had drug problems or would have had drug problems, it was prevented because of this wellness policy. And because of the fact that Chris Benoit had suffered so many concussions and they were made aware of this, you're not even allowed to hit anybody in the head with a chair anymore. And that was very commonplace back in the 90s. People would always bash each other in the head with a chair. But if you watch wrestling today, they'll tilt their body sideways and they get smacked in the back. So the overall health of the wrestlers is much better than it was in 2007. But like I said, I've had 10 years to reflect on this situation. I don't hardly think about Chris Benoit no more. When I see him on the network once in a while or watch a match, it's a very eerie feeling. And they're always excellent matches, but right afterwards and right before they start, you just always have that feeling when you look at that. And it just reminded me of something I already knew because I believe I was 25 at the time. Heroes you look up to are not always what they seem to be. Hell, my buddy Damon, shout out to him by the way, used to watch wrestling when he was a kid. He never was a hardcore fan or anything, but Chris Benoit was his favorite wrestler. And once he did what he did, he never watched wrestling again. At least not to my knowledge. He may have seen it flipping through the channels, but he really doesn't care about it anymore. And I also wanted to take this opportunity to go on a little tirade about people that ask if Chris Benoit is going to be in the Hall of Fame. Anybody with common sense would tell you the answer to this. and it's an absolute no. WWE doesn't mention him on WWE television, in their magazines, on their websites, and that is probably the best thing, because it doesn't matter that Chris Benoit was in the Four Horsemen, or that he won countless championships and all the promotions he went to, and that he was a former heavyweight champion, and he had the best matches, and had one of the best styles, and he was one of the greatest technical wrestlers that ever lived. Because at the end of the day, the horrible acts he committed, that overshadows anything he ever did in the ring, and his career will never be honored because of it. But there is one thing I would like to take WWE to task for, and that is not acknowledging Nancy Benoit. You know, she had quite a career in wrestling too. She was the Fallen Angel in Florida Championship Wrestling. She was Woman in WCW. A lot of people remember her from ECW. She was Kevin Sullivan's ex-wife. She managed a lot of people. And when I think of her with the Sandman. I think of her with Ric Flair and the Horsemen. I think of her whacking people with a Singapore cane. Nancy Benoit was a tough lady, and WWE likes to put a lot of people in the Hall of Fame, and I'm not going to call anybody out, but they select and pick who's going to be in that Hall of Fame, so why can't they go ahead and honor her? I understand because of the way she died that trying to honor her is a horrible reminder of the tragedy that happened. And I understand that there's going to be a lot of people that would be hurt and upset to bring that up again, but Nancy Benoit should not be forgotten. She should be honored for her contributions to the wrestling business. And I don't mean to go on a huge rant about this, but people are always asking why Chris Benoit isn't in the Hall of Fame, but what you should be asking is, why is Nancy Benoit not in the Hall of Fame? So the bottom line is that Chris Benoit is just one of the many tragic stories that's happened in professional wrestling. It's been 10 years and it's still left a huge black eye that wrestling has just quite never recovered from, because people are still talking about it today. I didn't personally know Chris Benoit, I don't hate Chris Benoit, but as a fan and as a person it did affect me, and that's all I have to say about that. Oh, and by the way, I'm not going to put any graphics up for the person that this video is about, but I will put a graphic up for the person who actually deserves it. So thank you guys for listening to the Derek Ruby Show. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and Instagram, and as always, have a good one, and I'll see you guys next time.